The Boys.
I actually have no specific problem with either DC or Marvel. My issue more is they are training the public to wait for a strong man to come in to save them. They're teaching the wrong lesson ultimately, because we all have to save ourselves and work together, and it's slow and it's small and it's boring. My issue more is they are training the public to wait for a strong man to come in to save them. They're teaching the wrong lesson ultimately, because we all have to save ourselves and work together, and it's slow and it's small and it's boring.
Like you said, I'm a superhero.
I mean, yes, that was the point of the comic, but even with that as a template, you still did the opposite of what the comic did, and did exactly what you just criticised, multiple times. Welcome viewers, this weekend I'm going to try and be more balanced and review two things from Amazon Studios, one good, one bad. For the good, I'll be looking at Reacher, and I'll leave a link below to the review for that. For the bad, Amazon Studios' The Boys. What is it? In short, it's a disappointment. It's a TV adaptation of a comic, and a pretty foul-mouthed, violent, crude and crass one, and that's kind of what I liked about it. The series showed some promise at first in Season 1, before straying so badly in Season 2, but watching it back, there are substantial problems with Season 1 too, and the series for me completely misses the point of the comic, and is one of the least faithful adaptations I've ever seen. They change almost everything, so before I get into specifics, there are spoilers coming up, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you have fun. The story of The Boys in the source material is heavily anti-corporate, which is kind of funny after the IP got sold off to Amazon. Seeing The Boys on Amazon is like Disney trying to be punk and anti-corporate. The comic is also heavily anti-fascist and also anti-superhero. It has a strong distaste for superheroes and links these three concepts of corporatism, fascism and superheroes together, and bear with me because that part will take some explanation. Maybe I should do timestamps. The series is such a terrible adaptation of the comic, to the extent that you could watch the entire of the series and it will not contain any spoilers for the comic whatsoever. You'll barely recognise the story at all. A lot of characters were cut from the comic version to make the series, such as Jack from Jupiter. New ones were also inserted, such as Translucent, and some were changed entirely. For example, the character of CIA Deputy Director Susan Rayner is completely changed in the series compared to the comic. Her personality, her actions, her story, her place in the greater story, as well as her violent and often degrading love affair with Butcher, which is in the comic a lot, but never in the series. She also expires in the series and not in the comics. In the comics, she's a blonde Caucasian woman. In the series, now being played by Jennifer Esposito, who's Hispanic, so she's now of a different ethnicity. So apart from having a different personality, doing completely different things, and changing her from being an alive blonde Caucasian woman to a deceased Hispanic brunette, they got her character bang on. They just made some minor changes. They did a similarly great job on Queen Maeve, who's changed from a blonde in the comic to a redhead in the series, and in the comic regularly took muscular men to bed 3 at a time. In the series, she's a lesbian. Huey is now also American, not Scottish, and has a completely different personality as well. It's one of the most consistently miscast shows that I've ever seen. Karen Fukuhara playing the woman is just, well, she's too attractive for the role she's playing. And there's another hallmark of Hollywood. Even ugly or plain characters will be played by extremely attractive people. This is Hollywood, that was casting bookish and maybe a bit plain and frumpy Velma in a live-action Scooby-Doo and picked Linda Cardellini. Do you get my point? I never watched the live-action Scooby-Doo films anyway because I have a chronic allergy to Matthew Lillard. But anyway, I digress. Frenchie is also pretty much nothing like the comic character in looks or personality. In the comic, he's a tall, gangly, awkward-looking crazy Frenchman who's being played as quite sane by a somewhat handsome 5'8" Israeli. The closest that they got to the source material with the series was, at least for the character of Mother's Milk, they approximately got an actor of the correct ethnicity. Sadly, they also gender swapped Mallory. James Stillwell from the comic has been replaced by Madeline Stillwell in the show, who also lives to the end of the comic and is, if anything, the main antagonist. In the series, Madeline expires at the end of season 1, and I better not get started on what they did to the character Black Noir, because the series has blown what I thought was the best part of the comic story that elevated the whole thing. They also gender swapped Stormfront from man to a woman, and although I really liked Ava Cash in that role, which frankly is a bit of a problem when one of the most charismatic characters in your show, and more charismatic than most of the heroes, is a dedicated fascist. And that is a big takeaway from the show for me. The cast is great, but the showrunners really demolished the story. Starlight's role in the story is also completely different from the comic, and increasing her role in the series is kind of what derails the show. There's a section in the Boys series, in episode 1, where Starlight joins the superhero group The Seven, an analogue of our world's the Justice League, and she's told by one of the other superheroes, the Deep, this universe's equivalent of Aquaman, that if she wants to join them, and she really does, she has to get down on her knees and do him an intimate favour with her mouth. And later on, she gets her payback on him by giving the story to the press. In the comic, it was quite different. The Deep didn't do that to her. It was instead Homelander, A-Train and Black Noir, and she never got any payback because she wasn't a hero in the comic. She was a victim. A person with superpowers being the hero of the story spectacularly misses the point of the comic story. It is in fact a total inversion of the point of the comic story. The whole idea was that the superheroes in it are a fraud. Starlight is beautiful and blonde and looks perfect on the surface, but on the inside she isn't. That's the idea. The series takes her and makes her damn near perfect and makes her into a superhero.
Like you said, I'm a superhero.
In the TV series, there are people with superpowers, called Supes, and the series made some Supes into heroes. Now in the comics, the Supes were not the heroes. They were mostly degenerates. Power-hungry bullies and narcissists. They were monsters, or at the very least they were deeply flawed. They were powerful, but power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, or as Butcher puts it in issue 55 of the Boys comic, as the old saying goes, with great power comes the total certainty that you're going to turn into a